welcome to Press Play, our public relations podcast that talks about all the real things, insider topics, and secrets that we talk about with PR. So with me here is Ashley Rhodes, our PR veteran slash also TV producer, experienced all around pro, and Ashley Pontius with nearly, actually very similar backgrounds, right? So TV producing, journalism, and PR background. So holy cow, I'm on with a couple dynamos. So thanks for joining me today. Well, today we're talking about national news, and it's something we do together actually every single day, which is we pitch nationally, we pitch locally, we pitch everywhere. And we want to talk about it because that seems to be like the biggest mystified area is people ask us all the time of, how do we get in front of national? How do we get national attention? And like, we're just here to tell the secrets. So let's do it. I'm going to dive in. I'm going to start with a question for Bethany, talking a little bit about national TV shows. What's your secret?
I like to go after and kind of really target the reporters and producers who put out the content that I know my clients are really pros with. So it does take, watching and kind of looking online to see, who does those pieces, and they're really easy to find. And especially if you are looking at national media, they're always really well put together. So you want something that's going to fit them. So I think just making sure that your pitch is kind of targeting their show. One thing that I always like to do is put the name of the segment in the subject line, so they know it's really for them. Great story idea for Money Matters, or something like that, so that they know right away that you know what they do, what they produce, what they talk about. And so they're probably going to be more likely to at least open it. And that's half the battle, is just getting them to open your pitch and read it, as we all know. And then, sometimes it does take a couple of times, but a lot of times when you are consistent and, have those ideas coming in, the more, I guess, luck you'll have with it.
Absolutely. And Ashley would love to know, do you feel that same way? Do you have any tricks up your sleeves?
Absolutely. Echoing Bethany, I absolutely think all of those tips are so important. I think too, with national media, a term we use a lot is newsjacking. So obviously national media is covering national stories. So it's about trying to find how your message, your mission fits into something that is part of the national conversation, whether it's a financial story and something happening politically, really anything, even something that might be in pop culture. How can you tag onto that, tie into it, and be part of that conversation? And sometimes it takes getting creative, but there's usually always a way to find something that you can insert yourself and your messaging into.
Definitely. I also like to watch the shows. I mean, we might not all have that luxury of that time, but if I really, want to be on a show, want our client to be on a show, I will just watch it a few times and just get that feeling, get the vibe of what it is, and then really be targeted with that. And I think that's what we're all saying is like the blanket pitch might work sometimes, cross your fingers, cross your eyes, but it's a little bit better to be targeted and really go after the shows that you want and be very specific. And speaking of that too, we hear a lot about podcasts too that are just really coming up in popularity, but also priority for clients and businesses, organizations. How do you guys feel about getting into these national podcasts or international even?
Yeah, it's so important. I think we talked about this in a past episode. Oftentimes those podcasts have that niche audience. So while it might not be as large as maybe a television network show or even a local news network show, you're really getting in front of your audience who cares, who is engaged in your messaging, who's going to maybe buy something you're selling, or they're going to want to become involved with your organization. So it's so important to get in front of those podcasts. And really it's about, again, as you were saying just now with watching the shows, I think with podcasts, it's about listening to their content. Who are they having on? What's the format? So you can really tailor your pitch to the kind of content that they're producing, and tell them why you think your client would be a great guest and give a great conversation to them.
Yeah, I like to see, I guess, who their previous guests are, especially if it's a podcast that's been around for, a couple of years or something like that. Because you can usually kind of tell what they're looking for as far as a conversation. But even if you see a guest that's similar to maybe what your client, what your company, what your nonprofit does, there's always a way to make it different. And that's, where we come in, right, as PR pros, and kind of knowing how to sell our client and kind of fitting something there that maybe they didn't have before, even with a similar guest.
That's a great point. I totally echo that, because I don't think we should get discouraged versus, when we see, oh my gosh, they just had so-and-so on, which is exactly what I've been pitching. In fact, you can use that as a signal that they have interest and that is your lane. You just have to keep pursuing it and figure out, now maybe a little bit of a different angle, but that there's evidence that they're interested in that. So don't get discouraged. In digital publications, I think we've all talked about this, many years ago, maybe it was a smaller audience. Now, digital publications have the same, or similar kind of audience and reputation as, maybe what we've seen historically with like print, or, something of a national level. Any tips or tricks for pitching nationally to those digital publications, Ashley?
Yeah, I think it's such a huge opportunity because there are so many of them and there are so many reporters. And the reason for that is there are so many freelancers now that work for various publications. You might have someone that's writing for both US News World Report and Go Banking Rates or Time. They're really writing across genres and across publications. So reaching just one reporter can set you up with numerous opportunities. And I think the key here, it's not really that different than pitching other genres. It's you want to be tapping into something that is affecting the national conversation, affecting a lot of people, consumers. And then you can also tap into, well, what are they writing? If you want to target a certain reporter, you can go and see, what types of articles they're writing, who do they usually interview, what's the format, what's their style, and really tailor a pitch to them, make it personal, say, hey, I just saw your article on this topic or that. I think that, my client X, Y, and Z, or I would be I'd be able to give you great commentary on this particular subject if you ever are writing about this again.
And those freelancers for me are a little tricky. So I'm always trying to master the the exercise of looking for a freelancer and understanding really who they're freelancing for and where they're going, because sometimes they can freelance and then go to a whole different area, maybe be several different areas. So the point is they're really powerful. And also I feel slippery because, I'm trying to always figure them out. They don't, they're not associated necessarily with a certain beat and a title at a certain outlet. So, but I think they're very, very valuable. And it's a really good point about digital in general. Bethany, anything, for digital that you kind of carve into your pitching style?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo everything Ashley had to say about freelancers. And I think one of the things that has really helped me is setting those media alerts, like the Google alerts, to kind of show up when someone prints a story about, say it's parenting or early literacy. You put in these Google alerts for those phrases or common words that you want to look for articles about. And then you can, pitch that writer if you think it's right. Maybe a follow-up and say, hey, I just saw like Ashley was saying, hey, I just saw this article on this. would you be interested in hearing someone kind of on this side? Or even just pitch them, something a little bit different versus what their story is. So it's a great way to stay on top of that news for your client as well. But then also, add to those media lists of people that are interested in that content.
Yeah, super good point. I really feel that setting up those alerts sometimes has been such a winning formula, has been so beneficial because I'll get, alert for somebody that I'm like, wow, I didn't know that they were focusing on that. And things change, the pieces move, and now I've got a new, way to reach out to them. So really, really good point. Talking about pitching specifically to national, we know like you have to have a really strong story, have to obviously know who you're pitching to. Do you guys ever, and maybe I'll ask Bethany, I'll start with you. Do you ever offer exclusive content, and does that work? Do you feel that that's important?
Yeah, it has worked. And I think one of the biggest things is when you're pitching that national reporter, don't be afraid to pitch that, super local story, especially if it has a wide, appeal, a mass appeal, and part of a bigger story. That's something that I did recently was something towards Alzheimer's. And of course, we know that that's, those numbers are growing. And so I wanted to pitch a national reporter on that. And I pitched my client who's really just super local. And so they were really interested in kind of how they're growing that local partnership to help people with Alzheimer's. So I would say that that's a pretty big win. And yeah, don't be afraid to, pitch that hyper local story even to a national reporter, because that's really what they're looking for, is something to tie it in.
That's such great points. And Ashley, if you offer exclusive, do you ever have like, who are you offering it to first? And how do you make that decision? And
Well, it depends on the client, obviously, but I think you want to go for the big fish. So, depending on what kind of client you have, a Wall Street Journal or a Washington Post, New York Times, you want to shoot for this guy. And that's really the point of offering the exclusive. Or if it's TV, a Good Morning America, Today Show. Offering that can make your story seem more important. And it can also just give you the leg up that, okay, well, you're not offering this to another competitor, and make them want to respond to you quicker. And you can also start to kind of winnow down maybe if you have a certain target list of publications, outlets you're going for. If you get a no on the exclusive, you can move on to the next. And it kind of just, you quickly, every few days, okay, I'm moving on to the next one. So it can really work, and it can lead to really, really good results. And I think especially if you have, even if it's, let's say you're working in the tech space and you want to be in one of those niche publications like a Tech Target or something like that, they love an exclusive. They love if you're going to say, okay, we're releasing this news, we're doing a press release on the 1st, but we'll give you an interview on the 20th, and you can be the first person to publish the story that morning before we even send out the press release. That can be just an extra win for them to get them to cover the story.
love it. We've had a few times where we've worked with, some major players, 60 Minutes, things like that, Good Morning America. And boy, did they really, really hone in on the fact that exclusive was really important to them and made sure. And I remember one conversation with 60 Minutes that they really, we were trying to figure this out because it was going to be a national story no matter what. And so we're like, what part of it can be exclusive? We'll give you the exclusive. We want to be with you, but it's just going to naturally unfold. And so it was even dividing, like, this person will talk with just to you, but we are going to talk with other shows, and here's how, and really get their approval on it before we move forward. And because you want it to work for everybody, and they really valued that. Yeah, and I think there's always follow-up, maybe don't be shy would be my tip. Is following up is not bad. We don't want to be a pain. That's weird, right? But You know, if you're like, well, I've already sent it once, do not feel like that's a bad thing to follow up again. I think that's super important. And, you know, just really being timely, relevant. What, you know, is if there's one more thing that you guys would add, maybe each of you, maybe starting with you, Ashley, what would your, you know, number one national tip be?
Yeah, I think following up is really important. You need to be aggressive. Like you said, you don't want to be too aggressive that they block you or just never open an email again. But um, following up every couple of days and offering something new, saying, "Hey, I'm just making sure you saw this. I really want to help with this story." Reading their content, saying, "I know you're covering this. You know, I really think that this would be a great addition to your coverage, to your conversation." Showing that you're actually watching, looking at what they're covering and focused on, and you're not just like blindly emailing them, offering things. I think that's the key too with a lot of national reporters and producers is making it personalized in some way for their show, their content, what they're reporting on, and following up with those anecdotes. And not being discouraged if you don't hear back, because think of how many emails they get. So for every one that, you know, they're not answering, they're getting, you know, 500. So it's really not a personal thing. They just are inundated with emails, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that they're not interested in your pitch or your client. So you just have to keep being persistent.
Absolutely. And Bethany, your secret superpower tip?
Yeah, I would say, I think this was a lot of what Ashley just said, but yeah, just targeting and really letting those reporters and producers know that this is for them, whether it is adding their segment in the subject line or letting them know what you thought about a previous segment or show, something like that. I just think it's really important to let them know that, hey, you're watching and you have something that you think that would be really valuable for their viewers. I think also too for digital to also offer those visuals, an opportunity for a visual, because it's not really just about, oh, it's an article online. You know, it's also about that emotion, and a lot of digital publications have videos, or they'll do, you know, pictures where you can kind of click through. So I think still offering them that will go a long way.
Absolutely. Well, so much that we unpacked here for national, and if you're really trying to get in front of that audience, and these are some very exclusive ways to do that. So thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for next episode. Thanks, everyone.